Before we begin, this video is sponsored by Sleeve Chief. You can find good quality accessories to make your deck and gear look good. Get card protector sleeves with artworks of all your favorite archetypes and cards for the main and extra deck. There's extraordinary border sleeves, and they've got you covered with deck boxes, playmats, and dice as well. Head on over to Sleeve Chief's website through my affiliate link in the description box below and use my code SHADOW at checkout to get 5% off your entire order. Let's begin. Alright, so let's talk rulings for the next format. A couple things came back. The meta is going to shift a bit, so I wanted to cover the most important things I could find at this point in time. And if you guys would want me to make more ruling videos, of course, let me know down in the comments. Also, share with me if there's anything interesting you feel like adding to this video, to this discussion, something you feel like is very, very important to remember moving forward. And also, please make sure to like the video if you like it. It really helps the channel. And you can also sub and ding the bell so you are always notified when I post. Of course, don't forget to check out Patreon, and the link is in the description box below. So for the first quick ruling, I wanted to include Denglong, and I will be looking down to read some of the cards. I have Dueling Book pulled up over here so we can discuss everything. So the relevant part of the text is if this face-up card leaves the field, and then you can special summon one Yangtze monster from your deck. And the question that's probably going to come up is if it triggers, if it gets sent back to the extra deck. And the answer is of course no, because per the rulings revision, cards cannot trigger if they leave the field and get sent back to the extra deck. And that's a fairly old thing, but I still wanted to mention it because I feel like Denglong might come up because it's a new card coming back. It might be used in Sword Soul. So things like Absolute Zero, Denglong, none of these can trigger anymore if they are spun back to the extra deck. So the next couple of rulings are going to be on the topic of what happens if cards get flipped face down, and it has to do with Xyz monsters and overall just where cards have to be for effects to activate. It can be kind of weird, but I swear it's fairly simple, so I'll try to do my best to explain it. So if a Rise card is activated to attach a material from the banish pile and Book of Moon is chained, a Rise card will be able to attach. It has nothing to do with the card being flipped face down. It can still attach materials, and that's very similar to cards detaching materials. But there was some confusion because Sprint from the Sprite archetype is actually worded differently in the OCG, and I don't know if you knew that, but basically in the OCG it does not specify that you need to detach from an XYZ monster, whereas here it does. So sometimes people will get confused as to whether or not Sprint can actually detach if an Xyz monster is face down, because they argue that the monster is no longer an XYZ monster. But it doesn't really matter, because from what I've heard, people say that because only Xyz monsters can hold materials, and materials are very obviously still there, Sprint can still detach. And I really dislike the fact that there is a lot of confusion when it comes to translation in the OCG. I think stuff should be a bit more on point, but you know, who am I to say? Basically, it is how it probably should be ruled, but I want to encourage you to talk to your head judge ahead of time if you want to be 100% certain. But Sprint should be able to detach from a face down monster, and it doesn't really matter that it's face down. And another ruling also having to do with the Sprint card and being face down, which is kind of funny, is Sprint the Iron Dash Dragon, because basically this one is, it's very weird because people will kind of have different opinions as to what happens. And again, I will read the card so we are all on the same page. But basically, during your main phase, you can move this card you control to another of your main monster zones. Then you can destroy all other face-up cards in this card's column. So if it gets flipped face down, will it still destroy cards because it's no longer this card? But that really doesn't have anything to do with it, because it doesn't matter that it's face down. It will still remember that it's this particular card in the monster zone. The only difference is if it actually moves locations to somewhere that is not the main monster zone. So if it would be moved to like a spell and trap card zone for whatever reason, it's not at this card anymore, so it won't be able to pop. But in every single other situation, so being flipped via whatever effect, it still destroys everything in the card's column. It doesn't matter that it no longer has like a name or which type of card it is still this physical card, so it will be able to pop. And again, on the topic of where cards have to be for effects to be able to affect them is, for example, if we look at Draco Berserker of the Tenyi, I wanted to include this because Sword Soul might be popping up again. It will become better in the new meta, not only because of Denglong. Some people also say that Denglong will not be played in the deck, but I still wanted to talk about it. The Draco Berserker of the Tenyi says that when your opponent activates a monster's effect, quick effect, you can banish it. And if a card is activated, for example, in the hand, like a hand trap, effect, veiler, joel, whatever, something that has to be pitched, you cannot actually banish it because it changed location. So it doesn't matter that Draco doesn't say in the hand or in the graveyard or in any specific place, but if a card is activated in some place, gets moved to another, you will not be able to banish it. So it has to remain in that location. Then I also wanted to cover the card from Cyberstorm Axis, which is a new one, and it's Time Tearing Morganite. So it might see play in the Flunder deck, which just I don't want Thunder to get additional cards, but that's really besides the point for this ruling. Basically, it says that you can banish this card from your graveyard, discard one Time Tearing Morganite, and your opponent cannot activate monster effects when you normal summon this turn. And it's very, very similar to Magical Meltdown, Branded Loss, all of these cards that prevent something to activate in a very specific time frame. So basically, it gets weird because Thunder monsters do more than one thing. So if you go normal summon Rubina effect, you search, and you do not summon, then your opponent of course can use Joel because it's in a new chain. You just use it in response to your opponent adding a card from the deck. However, because like I said, Thunder monsters do more than one thing, if they go normal summon Rubina effect, they search, but then they also summon. This is again a normal summon. So it literally prevents you from doing anything on that summon, even if it is in a new chain, because it's still in response to the summon, which you cannot do. So essentially this card literally makes it so you cannot interact with anything they do, which is horrible. You just have to have impermanence or something. And also it's really, really important to note, it's not one of those situations where, and we are going to shift to another example, but it still has to do with this one. If your opponent uses Dark Ruler, you can still chain something that's not a monster effect, like flip a continuous trap face up or something, then chain a monster effect because it's not directly responding. But when you're talking about the summon response window, everything that's happening in there, even if they would go like normal summon Rubina, you chain impermanence, they chain adventure, you cannot ash the adventure because it's still, everything is still responding to the summons. So it's not, you cannot compare it to the Dark Ruler thing because it's really not the same. So make sure to keep in mind that Flunder will be able to prevent you from activating stuff, and it just really sucks, but it's just what it is. And then to round this video off, I wanted to throw a couple Sky Striker rulings out there because Sky Striker might become more popular with 2 engage and 3 multi-roll. Although on an unrelated note, multi-roll will probably not be played at more than like 2 maybe, but still. Having to do with multi-roll is one of the rulings we'll be discussing today, which is basically just that if you set with multi-roll, of course the spells set off of it would have to be banished, but if the activation of the spells would be negated, they actually get sent to the graveyard because they are not being sent from the field because they never hit the field. Their activation was negated, they were never on the field, so they're not leaving the field, they're not getting banished. It's kind of horrible if you think about it. You are negating the activation, but they still get the spell in the graveyard, so you really need to decide what you want to be doing. But the other rulings having to do with Sky Striker are that Hayate, because it's able to send any Sky Striker card, it can also send Rose or Ray. So it's really important to note that if Hayate actually crashes, sends Ray will be able to be special summon from the graveyard if Hayate dies during that battle. And it's very, very similar to Rose, where you can use Hayate, destroy a monster in the extra monster zone. Really important that it's in the extra monster zone because of Rose's effect. You can send Rose, and Rose will also be able to be triggered. And the reason is that both Ray and Rose activate at the end. When everything is done, when monsters are destroyed, sent to the graveyard, when damage calculation is done, they both come at the very end. Hayate activates after damage calculations, and then monsters are determined to be destroyed by battle, but they don't get sent to the graveyard right away. They actually get sent a bit later, and at that point, Rose and Ray are both in the graveyard to actually quote-unquote see the card being sent there, destroy, whatever, and they can actually be summoned. So that's very important. And the last Sky Striker ruling is actually quite an old one, but it might still confuse some people. So Sky Striker versus Gozen match. Basically, if Ray is on the field, some people had the idea that somehow Ray could be activated in the sense of you could maybe summon Zeke off of it, but because Zeke can only be link summoned, once Ray is not on the field anymore, then you can just choose another Sky Striker because there is no set attribute on the field anymore. But the ruling was cleared up. Ray cannot even attempt to activate because you cannot even attempt to summon Zeke. So you cannot outplay Gozen. It's just not how it works. Gozen will still be able to be quite effective against Sky Striker in some instances. So Ray cannot, under any circumstances, go away to
summon Zeke, but not summon Zeke and then summon something else. It's not going to work. So if someone tries to do that to you, please just call a judge or something, or let them know that it's not how it works. So that's pretty much going to be it. Hopefully these were interesting to you, and hopefully they come into play. They actually are proven to be useful in the next format. And like I said before, please share some of your favorite or important rulings you have so everybody can read them in the comments. And if you like the video, if you feel like you learned something, and if you will want me to make more, please make sure to like it. It lets me know that you're enjoying this type of content, and I'll see you guys in the next video.